And it looks like we are live. And thank you, thank you. I appreciate. I know it's been a little while. It's been a while since I've been gone. Please, enough applause. Enough, really. Thank you. Listen, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to cut this short. Okay. The show must go on, as well as the self-promotion, which, by the way, look, given the serious nature of this subject matter, I just want to say that I've got t-shirts for sale, okay? And the links down below, as well as tapestries of my art, right? And by any chance, if anybody out there is like, oh my God, how dare you just fucking hawk your wares on this issue? I'll tell you something, this has, my art has a message, like this one over here. Think outside your tribe, which I think is at the crux of this problem. And I use the word crux because I'm an intellectual. And that's one of the things behind this all. I think one of the main points I want to make with this video with my guest here is that I think there's a lot of that intellectual vanity that gets in the way of solving our problems. And but it can be fun. It can be fun to have these debates. Like my guest here, which I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then I'm going to show the video where he shits all over me, just completely disparages one of my videos. But first, I'm going to introduce you to the 40 ounce.
Howdy. I do actually like that tapestry a lot in the background. I was wondering where you bought it, but you made it. That's actually really impressive. I do like that a lot. Yeah. Anyways, I am 40 ounce. I have my own channel. I'm also the co-host on the Red Eye stream with Mad Dodge, who's currently suffering under the jack heels of YouTube at the moment, unfortunately. His primary channel got banned, so he's plucking away on some poor secondary channel. So yeah, good stuff. YouTube oppression. It's awesome.
Which, by the way, talking about the shooting and stuff, with what happened with this, I forgot her name, Nasim or whatever. Jeez, talking about shooting and YouTube and the whole fucking demonetization, which, by the way, before I even started this, I already got the demonetization thing. Sorry, I've been sick and I've been working on something, so I've been out of the whole YouTube loop. What happened with Mad Dodge? I didn't even realize that his channel got banned. He got actually banned.
Yeah, so what happened is that he reached 1,100 subscribers, something along those lines, and he got super chat and everything, but then he had a sudden dip in subscribers. A bunch of people unsubscribed, and then he suddenly rose back up to 1,000. So he got super chat initially when he had first gotten a bunch of subscribers, and then he lost it again, and so he tried to reclaim super chat, but now all of a sudden on his main channel, he has lost the ability to stream. So he had to set up a secondary channel for streaming, and then on his original channel, he'll occasionally post videos to just keep updated on news and whatnot.
Oh, wow, man. See, part of the reason why I wanted to do this on my channel, aside from just fucking shamelessly shilling my wares, aside from that, is because I wanted to see if I could even still do this. And now I'm glad I did it, because now I could see it. There was already new little features where I was like, holy shit, did I completely forget how to do this now? But wow, I didn't realize YouTube was getting to that point. And I really do wonder, I mean, now we're probably going to get a little sidetracked with this, but it's still kind of part of the issue with all this. Damn, I didn't realize that it's getting that bad with YouTube. I mean, getting to the point where somebody went and shot up their fucking headquarters yesterday. Wow. And yet, yes. I think what's really driving them is, I think, honestly, it's got to be bottom line. I don't think they're such social justice warriors. I really don't think that. I think it costs, I don't know, the last I heard, it costs like, what, $100 million or something? Like, it can't be that fucking much a year, but they've got over 1,000 employees and stuff. They need to stay in the black. And I'm not being racist when I say that. They gotta do something. And I kind of get it. I mean, I don't think I could pitch this idea to fucking Netflix or HBO and stuff. I forget it. They wouldn't take this. And it's a very small thing. And yet I still love doing these videos and stuff like that. But I can sort of see why they're going that route. But damn, I didn't know it was getting that bad where they're just like canceling people's channels. Wow.
Yeah, no, I actually totally agree with you. I think the ideological aspect of censoring people on YouTube is rather overblown. Like, this is something that I don't know if you know who Six Hexenhammer is by
Oh, yeah.
chance.
I love this stuff.
Yeah, he talks about that all the time. You know, social justice warriors at YouTube, and I think that's rather overblown. I think what it is it's a case of marketing, to be honest. You know, YouTube runs at they run at a deficit. They're in the red every single year, right? Financially speaking, they're hemorrhaging money, absolutely ridiculous amounts of money, right? YouTube, or sorry, not YouTube. What's the parent company of Google? I forget the Alphabet. Thank you. So Alphabet basically keeps YouTube afloat because they can literally afford to, and it's the biggest video sharing platform. And they have what is essentially a monopoly. So why not just keep it afloat? Makes sense, to be honest. But they're at a point where they do have a pseudo monopoly, and they need to figure out how to make money on YouTube. Now, it used to be through ads, but the Wall Street Journal got jealous and decided to shit on a bunch of people. So now they have to start cutting back on ads. So it's really market forces, and I'm sure there's an ideological aspect, but I don't think it is as strong as a lot of people are letting on to. So I agree with you.
Yeah, and it's I'm like, and you know, I'm not trying to kiss anybody's ass. I don't give a shit if the CEO, Susan Wojcicki, whatever her name is, that's not it. But I really do feel grateful that fucking something like YouTube exists. You know what I mean? And especially with me, like this is, again, I don't want to get too sidetracked. We're going to definitely get to the gun control thing. But like, this is the best I can offer humanity. My art. That's it. This is like the peak of my intellect. Okay. And I find that a lot of those people, because I've been starting, especially for the job market, I've been trying to learn how to code and algorithms. You know, HTML, CSS I can get, but JavaScript, I didn't forget it. When you start getting into fucking all that, those algorithms and I can't. It goes fucking way over my head. And in my opinion, these are the people who truly propel civilization forward. You know what I mean? I think art plays its role too, but I think art is becoming, I wouldn't say obsolete, but it's got its limits. And yet it's a shame, man. It's a real shame because I think this is such a powerful platform, and Facebook as well, and Google to say the least. And it's a damn shame that they have to do these things, I think, in order to just stay alive, you know. But anywho.
Yeah, it is really depressing, to be honest.
Yeah.
Oh, look at you, you Debbie Downer. You made me sad.
No, and obviously we're not in the state of China, and that could be a whole other fucking video. I'm amazed. I mean, I've been keeping up with China and stuff like that, like what they're doing over there. Wow, man, they really, I mean, for any social justice warriors that might fucking stumble into this video, dude, go fucking set your sights on China and what's fucking going on over there, man. And how we are truly controlling the population, dude. It's just, and yeah, it's insane. But anywho, as far as gun control, okay, look, first of all, one of the things I want to do is I want to share the screen to show your video, which that was fucking great. Hold on a second. Here it is. It's I thought this is one of the best responses I've ever had, because very few people respond to this level. I mean, I get comments and shit like that, but for somebody to fucking put this together, and it was a learning lesson for me too. Yeah, it was a definite learning lesson. I do need to tone it down. I don't need to get this fucking excited. So anyway, here we go. Let me see. Screen one. This is how fucking backwards. Let me share this. All right. Here we go.
What's this? The early 1900s are calling. They want their prohibition back, Nachi. Do you remember how that worked out? Do you remember the roving gangs that followed in the wake of prohibition? You literally sound like a woman from the early 1900s bitching and moaning about alcohol. You literally sound like a woman from the fucking what was it called? Temperance era. That's literally what you fucking sound like.
I love that. And then for anybody who wants to see what these women look like, These sanctimonious cunts. Look, it was right here. Right
Wait,
here.
what does it say? Lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. Oh God.
I wonder if this one is kind of photoshopped and like it might be actually a modern picture, but it does sound like it does look like one of the things that they did, but they look like they're making a little too much of a joke, because I thought that these people were really, really clearly serious. And when you see it, I don't know if you saw the Ken Burns documentary about prohibition. When you watch the documentary and you hear the stories on what was going on, it almost seemed to make sense. I was like, yeah. And especially with the limited information that these people had. Oh, great. Now my nose is starting to run. But anyway, and it's interesting that somebody would make that analogy to me. I'm like, holy shit, that was a little moment of cognitive dissonance. So the points I want to make with this video, I want to make it worthwhile. Granted, who knows, maybe this could be some sort of legislation. I'm going to be contacting my senators and my congressmen this week, tomorrow, hopefully, with what I think are sensible policies. Many other people think are sensible policies too. Because I do think that the points that I want to prove with this video are sensible, and I'm reading my own things, because if not, I get sidetracked. Sensible gun legislation. Point number one, main point is sensible gun legislation can be implemented without abolishing the Second Amendment, much less a nationwide gun buyback, let alone a recall. Of course not. I don't think we have to go that fucking far. There's a balance we need to find. And I want to show your video again, because I want people to watch it. You made a lot of really good points, but a lot of points that for example, with this about the abolishing the Second Amendment and stuff, I think we really can find that balance, dude. And between abolishing the Second Amendment, which I don't agree with, and everybody fucking owning like a fucking aircraft takedown fucking or a nuclear bomb or something like that, we could find the balance between these things. I don't think it's that fucking difficult.
Well, if it's any consolation, I'm certainly not in favor of McNukes. I don't know if you've heard that joke, but I'm certainly not in favor of that. I wouldn't never go that far.
And so I'm curious to hear what yours are, if you have any. But I got the impression from your video that you, like many other people, and I know that was another funny thing, where you're like, oh, great, this guy knows someone who knows somebody. And the whole point that I was trying to make is that these mass shootings are happening with such a frequency that it's getting, like, it feels like it's inching closer and closer, at least in my personal life. And I didn't make that video because I was trying to virtue signal to my wife's friend's son or anything like that. When I saw this mass shooting, I was like, holy shit. For me, it's self-preservation, okay? Just like self-promotion, self-preservation as well. And it seems like they're getting much more and more frequent. Granted, what happened yesterday at YouTube wasn't a mass shooting, but it's like, goddamn. And even after Parkland, there was another shooting in Maryland. And then I don't know how many other, like, I've been reading stories of these 18-year-olds that still went out. There was one story of an 18-year-old whose mother gave him money to go get a tattoo, and then said he went to go get a fucking, I think it was an AR-15 to shoot up the school. And then I think the mother had to report on him. And I'm not going to go fish out that story right now, but it's real, unless it's fake news. But I think it's real. And it's happening with such a frequency that it does feel like, holy shit, it's getting closer and closer. And I live in South Florida. I'm not going to say exactly where I live. With fucking the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, and then Parkland, which is like Fort Lauderdale. And I'm like, holy shit, it's just fucking inching closer and closer. And for people to say, well, guns aren't the problem, I'm like, dude, it's called a fucking mass shooting. It's baked into the term. You know what I mean? And so another thing that I want to go over were a lot of what I consider to be pseudo-intellectual arguments about why we should, not do anything. And I've actually heard them from people, I'm not going to mention who, let's just say it's my neighbor's cousin's father-in-law's butcher, okay? I had a conversation with a butcher, and it's funny, I hear it all the time. I've already had a couple conversations with people, and they use the same analogies. Like, for example, guns don't kill people, people do, which I thought that was already obsolete. Another one is the false equivalences, like cars kill people too. We're going to ban cars. Cars are not designed to kill people, and much less at the rate an AR-15 would. And here's another one, since my family's Cuban. People are like, well, your family's from Cuba, you should know better about a fucking dictatorship taking away people's guns. Cuba was a series of dictatorships before this last fucking piece of shit, this cancer called the Castro regime. There was the Batistas, there was Machados, and people had guns, and they didn't take down those dictatorships. So that's why I think it's very possible to find the right balance where we keep our Second Amendment, we keep our right to protect ourselves, and yet we reduce these things. But anyway, now I've been talking too much. You go ahead, man. You tell what sensible policies are up your sleeve.
Yeah, so there, I of course have problems with the kind of I don't want to say atypical, but the typical view towards an AR-15, because I'm sure we'll get into that later. But I actually have, and I live in California, so obviously I'm not allowed to own a gun. So, but unfortunately, I have actually pretty extensive knowledge about ballistic tests regarding AR-15s, because I kind of am interested in guns and everything like that. But I do want to hit on first your you mentioned self-preservation, and to be honest, I actually think that's quite a rational position to hold. I was talking on an earlier stream today with Mad Dodge, and we were talking about the not necessarily self-preservation, but the concept of self-interest. And I'd mentioned Ayn Rand. She talks about this in The Virtue of Selfishness, one of the books she wrote. And she makes the argument that it is entirely rational to be, how could I say this in condensed terms? It is entirely rational to want something that is within your own interest. Now, whether, of course, this applies to legislation. So people in California, for instance, they're more concerned about self-preservation. So they don't want the scary AR-15s. They don't want this, that, and the other thing. They don't want all these things that these individuals might see as intruding on their self-preservation. I think that's a good way to summarize that. But nevertheless, I have an incredibly huge problem with the way AR-15s are viewed. Now, as I said before, this has a lot to do with ballistic testing. So, for instance, the AR-15, it's literally a step up from a 22. I'm not exaggerating here, right? The AR-15 typically fires a, what was it, 223 or a 5.56. Now, a 5.56, if anyone knows, has awful penetration, right? Now, when tested against ballistic gel, the 5.56, I think it penetrates between 15 and 20 centimeters. Fucking Europeans, goddamn. 15 and 20 centimeters. Now, a 9mm Glock penetrates 50 centimeters. Okay, a 45 ACP can penetrate up to 60 meters. And even a 12-gauge shotgun, for instance, can penetrate between 30 to 50 meters because, it's individual pellets, and depending on the trajectory, it can, science, right? So the problem is that I have with people's arguments against the AR-15 in particular. And this is why, to be honest, I was rather emotional myself during that response video. But the problem I have is that the AR-15 that shoots a 5.56 round, as I previously said, has awful penetration, right? So, and that's, in regards to a plaster wall. So if my girlfriend is standing behind this wall and she pulls the trigger on a 5.56, okay, well, it's going to lodge itself in the wall behind me. But if she pulls the trigger on a 44 Magnum, it's going to go through the wall behind me and hopefully kills my neighbor's cat, because the thing has kept me awake for the last 2 nights. So there is a huge difference in terms of lethality that people refuse to recognize. And, I don't expect you to know every little fucking thing about guns, but this is inherent to a lot of people on the far left that will talk about the AR-15, and they present it in a way due to the fact that it is, as it's called in the gun world, quote unquote, tactical, meaning it looks cool, it looks deadly, But in reality, in terms of home defense, the AR-15 is the most practical weapon because it has awful penetration. And let's be frank, you can put on flashlights, laser sights, so it makes it more accurate. And, you're not exactly killing the kid in the room over. So, and the recoil is a lot less as well. If my girlfriend pulls the trigger on a 44 Magnum, she's just going to put a bunch of holes in the ceiling. So the recoil is manageable. Even like a 12 gauge shotgun, the recoil is a little punishing if you're not exactly trained in firearms. But I went on for a while. Would you like to go on?
No, that's cool, man. That's fine. I was checking comments before just to let people know because the regulars are here. Mad Dodge is actually in the comments. I don't want to turn this into a clusterfuck, and so that's why I'm not inviting people in. And but everything you were saying, like, yeah, okay, look, you're bringing up good points, but it's funny. And again, I don't know how else to reference this. People I've spoken to, okay, and I know anecdotes don't count for shit, but it is interesting. The two comments that come very close with two people that I spoke to who are AR-15 owners. I asked them, why would you buy an AR-15? One of them was like, dude, because it's like a fucking toy. Okay, it's like, what's the difference between buying? If you could afford a Ferrari, why wouldn't you buy that as opposed to a Toyota? I'm like, wow. And I'm not knocking this guy, because if this guy is watching right now, I'm gonna have to hear his shit tomorrow morning. But for me, like, I was like, damn, dude. I mean, do you not? And here's what I see. It's like, it seems to me that because and the other person that I spoke to, very similar answer, and I'm like, do you not realize that for a hobby, for people to satisfy their hobby, which you have every right to, this is a unique hobby because it's a hobby that involves purchasing a machine that is specifically designed to murder people, and the ease of the availability of with which anyone seems that they can get it. I think that's the problem. That's the problem. However, you're pointing out things that I was like, holy shit, I didn't realize that. With the AR-15 being better for, like, let's say someone like my wife, because obviously for me, in the end, the reason why I still stand by the Second Amendment, clearly it's more than anything for self-defense. It's not so much that we would be able to hold back the government. I think that's too late. But I did read actually today, and getting everything ready for this, there was one good point that someone brought up, which was, an armed citizenry is the last line of defense when it comes to chaos like civil unrest. And I think that's very true. Very, very true, especially considering the race riots that we had here in Miami. So by any chance of watching me and they're like, why are you so obsessed with Black Lives Matter? Because it recalls to me the race riots that we went through. And the people that I know, someone, I don't know, I'm not going to even get into the little fucking 6 degrees of separation, someone that we know that was burned alive in their fucking car. Okay, back in the 80s with I think it was the McDouglas, or I think it was called the McDouglas riots. Anyway, right now it's escaping me. So, and I'm trying to see, like, there's got to be a balance. There's got to be some balance. And without further ado, look, I feel like I'm going on, but let me just bring up the sensible policy. So anybody who's tuning in and wants to tune out, this is what I think would be sensible policies that other people have been saying. Number one, raising the age limit to 21 on gun purchases. And here's part of the thing that I want to talk about. The point of this video is the NRA right now is filing a lawsuit against our governor, Rick Scott, for trying to do that. There's a money trail. I wish more people who think about having an AR-15 as a toy would realize that too, and how we're jeopardizing people's lives. So that's point number one, raising the age limit. I think that's a sensible policy. Sensible policy number two, having maybe 30 days is a long time, but having between 10 days to 30 days waiting period for gun purchases. Number three, no more, even though I think this has already been done, but not everywhere, no more high capacity clips of more than, like, let's say 10 bullets. Number four, and I think Trump just did this one, banning bump stocks altogether and not allowing gun manufacturers to get crafty and try to come up with new shit, okay, on bump stocks. Number five, the terror suspect no-fly list with the recourse to argue your case. I think that's pretty fucking sensible. And it was amazing how many people have come against that one, too. The red flag law, which Marco Rubio just talked about right now. Now, he's going to, go ahead.
Sorry, could you elaborate? I haven't heard about that.
Well, the red flag law, if I'm not mistaken, and I think they almost did it somewhere where if somebody poses a danger, like, for example, this girl that just shot up YouTube, she was showing signs, and a relative, was like, hey, listen, we got problems, and I know that this, sorry, runny nose. That's the detriment of having a fucking wrestling mask. The, how do you call it? The ability for authorities to come over and confiscate your guns if you're a proven threat. I mean, and Marco Rubio supposedly spoke out about this, that he's supposedly going to do this. Now, whether it follows through on it or not, that's a whole other issue. Now, I'm wondering if I don't have any mucus on my fucking fake mustache. Perfect. Just a couple more. Look, these are the last 5. No more assault/tactical rifles with the ability to kill more people more quickly than an average handgun where you spray bullets. But you made a really good point. The good thing about an AR-15, you don't have that recoil. I take for granted that I can shoot. I do know some guns. I've done shooting and stuff like that. Glocks, especially, people have always advised against a baby Glock 45, which is what I always want to get. It's all a recoil, and it's, I can handle it, but I get it. Maybe someone who's a woman, the people who need it the most, women, may not be able to handle that. But anyway, I'm sort of, I'm kind of, I don't like to use the word ban, but yeah, I wouldn't propose the ban, but if a ban came about for those assault tactical rifles, I mean, anyway, and then the last ones, banning people with proven mental issues, domestic violence, and aggravated assault. Can't, because that's part of this one. I think we need to start realizing it's not just simply gun rights, they're privileges, just like driving. Okay? If you prove yourself to be quite a threat, your driving rights are taken away. I think the same way we're going to need to do with guns. We'll see this from the last ones. Mandatory ownership/safety course and licensing. Background check with universal background checks, which I thought that those were already in place because it's been a while since I bought a gun. But no, apparently there's quite a few. There's, I think, 22% of gun purchases are done without background checks, which is probably on the private level of gun sales. But having some sort of mandatory background check with professional mental health evaluation. And last one is what I was just mentioning right now, a much stricter check and follow-up on private sales between individuals. I think those allow us to keep our Second Amendment and our right to protect ourselves. And I think it would really, really keep guns, especially those type of assault tactical rifles, out of the reach of the people who are committing mass shooting, and we would have less frequent mass shootings, which basically pose a threat to us all. Now you.
All right, cool. Take a sip of my alcoholic beverage really quick. All right. A fun fact, I'm drunk every time I make a video. So anyways, it's true. So, sorry, I had to take notes because that was quite a bit to absorb. So the first part that I have a problem with is the quote-unquote designed to murder. That's not necessarily true. I mean, they're designed for whatever you really want them to. A lot of this has to, in terms of the way people view guns, a lot of this is a cultural aspect. If you're a farmer living out in, I don't know, fucking Wyoming or some god-awful state that I never want to visit again in my life, then you probably own an AR-15 to shoot coyotes or, you know, coyotes, right? The animals, not the actual people, right? Let's back up a second. So you're probably using it to protect livestock or something like this. Okay, we'll go to Chicago, and Tyrone has a Glock as he's shooting at the Bloods across the street. So, respectively, this is a massive cultural difference.
Race baiting. No, I'm just kidding.
Typically, well, kind of, a little bit, admittedly, a little bit of race baiting. But no, I mean, this is a massive cultural difference. Typically, people in rural areas will own AR-15s or, you know, tactical or assault weapons, whatever you want to call them. They will own them for protecting livestock or for home defense. And admittedly, some people in suburban areas own weapons for self-defense as well. But this typically isn't the case, because typically when there's crime, violence, it happens with unregistered weapons with the serial number scratched off, or it'll happen with weapons that are typically stolen from someone who had previously owned that weapon legally. But it's a huge cultural shift. And so this all has to deal with cultural relativity. And unfortunately, there's no argument against that, because it's cultural relativity. Personally, I'm not an objectivist. I read Ayn Rand every once in a while. I don't totally stroke my dick to her, unfortunately. But respectively addressing some of the concerns that you brought up, you spoke of raising the age limit. A lot of the problems that I have with that has to do with weapon ownership in general. Because I don't know if you have ever had this, and admittedly this is anecdotal, but I know it's relatively common. Grandpa will go out and buy a .22 rifle for his 16-year-old and gift it as a birthday present. But, you know, it's in Grandpa's name. But, you know, the 16-year-old has it. And they go to the shooting range and they do all their hoo-ha, and they, you know, go out into the countryside, shoot some beer cans perched on a rock or something. So, de facto, a lot of 18-year-olds already own weapons. So specifically in the state of Florida, you might have a little bit of trouble trying to pry those weapons from the hands of 18-year-olds who, under previous laws, had owned them legally. You're probably going to end up with a scenario akin to... I am totally forgetting what state it happened in, but... during Hurricane Katrina, Bush ordered that the National Guard go around and collect people's weapons. Well, people took pot shots at the National Guard, and I have a feeling that you're going to end up with a scenario that's very much like that. So that's relatively dangerous. So personally, I wouldn't necessarily advise for that. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, you can go join the army and die for our country. You can smoke cigarettes. Why can't you own a gun? I think those, personally, I do see the merit, but I do think that at the root of that argument is a bit of a logical fallacy. You have to look at laws in a practical stance, and you have to look at the real world implications of said laws. Excuse me. What was the other thing? Oh, 10 bullets. Or no, own limitations on high capacity magazines. The thing is that how people view those high capacity magazines. To some people, 30 rounds plus one in the chamber, that's a high-capacity magazine. I don't know why. Because typically when you look at, for instance, when you look at, like, the average burglaring incident, right? When burglars come into your house and you just so happen to be home and not at work that day because you're sick, typically you're talking about groups of 2 to 4 people, right? So there is a necessity for 30-round clips, because when you're shooting at someone, typically, and this is from police reports, you're shooting at more than one person. And that's not even including the fact that, oh, well, you absolutely have to defend yourself, so you take like 5 or 6 shots and you miss them all. So, I mean, if it does turn into a gun battle, you may or may not be fucked. And typically, when burglars do come into your house, they're carrying handguns, something that's easily concealable, something that has far more penetrating power, so they can shoot you behind the 2 walls that you're hiding. You know, so there's a massive amount of practical problems. As for the banning of bump stocks, that literally isn't going to change anything. If you open up an AR-15 and you take a file to a very specific part that I'm not going to mention, you can turn it fully automatic. There are literally tutorials on how to do this. You can also get the same result from tying a belt around the trigger. You can get the same result from, like, literally 3 or 4 other different things. So banning bump stocks, yes, you eliminate bump stocks, but you don't eliminate the, how should I say it? You don't eliminate the ability of an AR-15 to go fully automatic, because this is just something that it's not inherently built into the firing mechanism, but it is something that is modifiable, and it's inherent to an AR-15. So it's kind of hard to ban those things. Oh, that one I didn't have. Oh, it was the waiting period. I didn't necessarily, personally, I don't mind waiting 30 days. Some people argue against you. Let them argue that fact. I don't feel like it. Background checks, yeah. The problem I was going to mention with background checks, Florida does not necessarily, what was it? Florida law doesn't necessarily shadow that of federal law. So if someone reports someone federally, Florida doesn't necessarily check up on that all the time. I believe they do have the ability, but it is not mandatory in Florida law. I think that is something you guys need to do, because Nicholas Cruz, for instance, was reported to the FBI. No one followed up on that. And whoever sold him the gun actually broke the law by not waiting the mandatory time in which to actually sell him the gun. And then no assault weapons. We don't have assault weapons. We have semi-automatic weapons. An AR-15 isn't an assault weapon. It's like a semi-automatic hunting rifle, really, with shit-stopping power. it's a surprise. It doesn't just bounce off your skin. Sorry, I had to take quite a few notes. I'll tell you what. That's all. I'll let you go.
No, a lot of good points. I just want to say to everybody who's watching, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for all the comments. But I'm sorry if I just can't do two things at the same time. I fucking either I need to learn how to do it, or I clearly cannot multitask. And I want to pay attention to what you're saying, because you're making actually really good points that are making me reconsider. Yet I think at the same time, though, I'm still not off my rocker on some of these gun. Not just me, obviously other people, because a lot of these ideas I actually just been reading from other people, and I agree with these. I agree with these policies. In terms of all the technicalities of being able to turn an AR-15 into a fully automatic, putting a belt on the fucking trigger, which I didn't even think you could do something like that. Okay, but I think at the very core of what a lot of people like myself, Second Amendment gun owning, Second Amendment. I want to come up with a good phrase for this. Gun-owning Second Amendment supporters, okay? The fact that people like us are still up for these, some of these legislations, is because of the ease and availability with which people like Nicholas Cruz can actually get a gun. And yeah, it's true. The FBI dropped the ball. The local police and all that shit. But you know what? If the law would have been in place for him not to be able to buy for him not to be able to buy it because of at least being 21, those would have been moot points anyway. Now, will he have gone out of his way to have made a bomb or something like that? Now, that's where we're going to get into hypothetics. There was the case afterwards of that guy in D.C. making bombs, but again, people died, but not as many and not as easily. And that's the point. That's the main point that a lot of us are trying to say, that I'm at least trying to say. And I think the frequency is there. There was a lot of really good points by Mad Dodge and stuff like that. But it is interesting when I see these either false equivalences or things like, especially, guns don't kill people, people kill people. They're there. The possibility increases. The possibility for mass shootings, not even just mass shootings, random shootings, increase when you have that ease and availability. And again, with the case of the age limit, another one of the main points I want to make. When finally someone like Rick Scott, conservative Republican, he's like, all right, look, you know what? Let's fucking do this. Because it's amazing that the guy could buy an AR-15, but he can't buy alcohol. And then the other weird thing, he could buy an AR-15, but not a handgun. You know what I'm saying? So he puts legislation, and what does the NRA do? They try to file a lawsuit against him. And there, it's not about civil rights, dude. When the NRA is doing that, they're speaking for gun manufacturers and salespeople and a bunch of people who are going to they're going to take a hit. They're going to take a hit, but guess who else is fucking taking a hit? The public. That's the problem, and that's the main thing I'm trying to say. And it's not that far fetched. That was one of the other points that somebody made about the statistics, considering that there's more guns than U.S. citizens in the United States, supposedly. Which, by the way, I think 3% of gun owners own like 50% of the guns, which should also tell you something. I think I'm losing my point on this one. Yeah, as far as the statistics are concerned, they kind of mean nothing. This is a life and death issue, man. This is something where it's getting more frequent. It's coming closer. And I remember one of the other things that you pointed out in your video where you were making fun of me about the armed shooter training video. Dude, that's how commonplace it is. And I remember taking that armed shooter training video like a week or two before the Parkland shooting. After the Parkland shooting, there was the other one in Maryland. The one yesterday in fucking YouTube. For people to deny that this is a fucking issue that does not happen in every country. It's very unique to us because of the ease and availability of firearms that fall into the hands of people who should not have them. I really don't see why people are so adamant against sensible legislation that'll dramatically reduce those frequencies. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, this goes back to the view of an AR-15 being a scary black, baby killing machine. It's really not. The penetration is awful. A 5.56. I don't even know if it can shoot through one of my books. No, that's not true. It's fine. It's a piece of metal going 1,000,000 miles an hour. Of course, shoot through books. Sorry, that was a stupid statement. But the 5.56 does not have the stopping power of something like a Glock. So the fact that you could buy an AR-15 before he could buy a handgun doesn't surprise me. I mean, a 5.56 is way less powerful than, like, say, a 12 gauge or a 9mm. So the fact that, you have to be 21 to get a handgun, that doesn't surprise me at all. Personally, I think at the age of 18, you should just be able to own any gun. Again, save for the privatized nukes. That's a whole different other story. But at the point of 18, personally, I think you're an adult. You're allowed to make political decisions that are impactful on the country. You're allowed to make your own personal choices in regards of health and, smoking, consumption of alcohol, because let's face it, I drank a ton of vodka at the age of 18. So you're able to make these decisions consciously, and you're able to make them with some kind of agency, I suppose, because you're not necessarily under the guardianship of your parents at that point. So there's that. But I do want to touch briefly upon the point of the NRA just being, they're suing people for, and they're backed by the, I don't even know how many, like millions of dollars from gun manufacturers and so on.
Yeah, I forgot the numbers. I have them. I could probably be pulling them up, but it's wow. When you really start, I don't know. Well, go ahead. I'm curious to see what you know of that, because it's a lot and by the millions per either congressman or senator. But go ahead.
To be honest, I would actually be curious. If you do have those numbers up, I would like to hear them. If you don't, that's fine. But yeah, they're going out and they're paying politicians, but this is something that everyone does. So someone in support of Hillary Clinton has no room to lecture me on how the NRA is bribing politicians and whatnot. Because let's face it, how many millions of dollars did she outspend Trump by? I mean, it's a ridiculous statement. Let's try and avoid these dick measuring contests, is what these essentially are. But the reality of the matter is that people do support Hillary Clinton. And just as much as Hillary Clinton speaks for people, the NRA also speaks for people. The NRA also does support an aspect of the population that owns guns. Now, not every gun owner is like a registered NRA member, but the NRA does support gun owners. The NRA does fight for the rights of gun owners. The NRA is in multiple lawsuits trying to preserve the Second Amendment. And a lot of that has to do with specifically FBI testing of the 5.56 round, and, you know, has to do with comparisons of firearms. It has to do with the lethality of firearms. And in retrospect, realistically, an AR-15 just isn't dangerous. And I'm sorry if I touch upon this, but this is something I really want to nail home, because people just don't understand that. Okay, a Glock is going to kill you from 3 rooms over, but an AR-15, it's probably not gonna. So that's just, people hype up the AR-15 to such a degree that it's really magnificent that it gets these awful, you know, baby killing machine and all these other crazy names. And that is something that really does bug me, because its effectiveness, it's, let's face it, you'd be better off with a 22. At least the ammunition weighs a little less, I guess.
But here's, I'm sorry, you're going to continue, or?
Oh, no, you can go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what you're saying with the AR-15, that it's safer and it can't kill. It has. It has. I mean, look, granted, it's Wikipedia. I think we can. Go ahead.
Sorry, I did not say it couldn't kill. Right, it will kill you. It's a piece of metal going, you know, 1,000 meters a second, or I don't know the statistics. It will kill you, but I mean, in terms of safety and penetration, in terms of lethality, it is far less than the average handgun, which typically shoots 9mm.
No, granted, and I get that, and I don't want to. I remember for a little while I finally discovered, oh, okay, 9mm versus, for example, a 38, like the numbers, and I realized, oh, it's some of them are actually going by the metric system, and some of them are going by, I think, the English system. But anyway, as far as calibers and stuff like that, the bottom line is, it's clearly happening. I mean, would I go so far as to say it's an epidemic or a pandemic? Maybe not. But I'm just looking here, Wikipedia, and I think this one you could trust, because all they're doing is just listing what is known. Dude, 2018, okay, just this year alone, okay, 17 deaths in one of these mass shootings, semi-automatic rifle. 2017, Las Vegas, which the Las Vegas shooting could not have happened. That could not have happened merely with handguns. I don't think it could have happened. I don't know. I'd be curious to see how that. Well, fucking how many people? 59 people there, okay? Same year, fucking Sutherland. Sutherland happening after Las Vegas, which, by the way, the real issue here is the mental health behind these people. These are people who obviously are clearly not functioning normally. But then again, that's the whole point. The ease and availability of people like that to get their hands on guns like these when you have body counts of 17, 59, 27, 50, 16, 10, and that's just within the last 2 to 3 years.
I apologize. I have to step away for just a second. Do you wanna keep going? I'll be back really soon, I promise.
Right now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take care of the comments.
Oh, excellent. Thank you very much.
Man, thanks for being on and for making the video and stuff like that. And yeah, man, look, there's for the people watching and stuff like that.
Oh, I'm still down. I have to step away for literally just 1 second. I apologize.
Oh, all right. No, it's cool.
Okay, I'll be right back, I promise.
Did you want to rebuttal any of the things that I was saying, or?
Oh, a few things. I'll write them down really second, and then I'll step away.
Okay, so then let me do this with everybody watching. There's not many issues that I fucking go this out of my way for. And I notice that the ones that I do, it's because there's a life and death or some sort of oppression or authoritarian state behind it. And especially with the mass shootings, this is why I must look like I'm going liberal, which, by the way, another cliche that I heard from my neighbor's cousin's father-in-law's butcher. When I started talking about this, he's like, well, you becoming a fucking liberal now? And that's one of the things I want to address. I'm not making fun of this butcher, okay? I love this butcher, by the way. But my point is, there's a psychology, there's a certain obstinance that I think needs to be addressed, that is putting all of our lives collectively in peril, man, with just the tweaking of a little bit of fucking legislation. And last but not least, I'm realizing just how difficult this issue is. It's not for nothing why this is a problem. It's very difficult to discuss. I can only imagine in the fucking halls of Congress. And there's a lot of notes you have to fucking take. You can't get sidetracked, and there's a lot to it. But I think some of these, which now, of course, now I'm questioning some of them myself. But one of them, which is raising the age to 21, which granted, are we going to raise the age then on the military to 21? Because it's okay to send them out to go and kill people in foreign lands if they're 18. But if they're 18 and in this country, they can't buy a gun to defend themselves. I kind of get that. But man, I don't know how else to point this out. And it's not because of a lack of a better argument or a lack of a better word. Man, how do people not realize that this is an issue? It's clearly an issue and a unique one to the United States, man. And here's where here's where statistics also are manipulated, because people are like, oh, well, statistically per capita, it happened in Norway, they have a higher per capita. Dude, people are still going back to the 2011 with that guy Anders Breivik, whatever his name was, and the 89 people he murdered. Okay, and especially I can only imagine the gun restrictions they have there. They do not. Norway does not have the frequency of shootings that we have here, man. You know, I don't know how else to present it that way. I'm not going to flip out. I'm not going to fucking become like a temperance. I'm not going to act like one of these women and stuff. I feel like it's something that could affect us, dude. It could affect anyone. And though the statistics, you want to go like, oh, you have a 1 in I don't know how many millions of a chance of fucking getting shot by a mass shooter. That's the same argument people have done with Muslim terrorism. And because there is the statistic that you have a higher chance of getting killed by a toddler with a gun than you do by an Islamic terrorist in the United States. And I never agreed with that. That does not diminish the threat of Islamic terrorism. Okay, we can't fucking. But that same argument is now being used with this by people. People who would make that argument against that are the same people who are saying, oh, yeah, but the statistics of you getting shot by mass shooting, it does not outweigh the Second Amendment and stuff. Again, man, I think we could find a very sensible, practical medium with this to reduce them, is the main point of this video, and why my panties are in a bunch over this issue. So, anything else you wanted to add on that one, man? Or let's see, step up. Man.
I'm back. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's cool, man. It's cool.
All right. So, where were we? Sorry, do you wanna paraphrase what you said briefly?
No, it's cool, man. No, what I was basically saying is, it's funny. I feel almost at a loss for words, but not at a loss for good arguments. It's just amazing to me how difficult it is to make people realize, dude, this is an issue. This is an issue. And coming back to the whole thing about statistics and all that, at this point, as much as people, like when people on the right, oh, okay, let me see if I can show this. People on the left were trying to diminish the threat of Islamic terrorism by saying you have a higher chance of getting killed by a toddler with a gun than you do by an Islamic terrorist. And when I would see that on Huffington Post and fucking Vox and all these other fucking, I can't stand those fucking people. When I would see that, I'm like, hey, that does not take away the threat. It's still fucking there. Okay. But now you have people on the right practically almost making that same argument, where they're almost like saying, you know, the statistics are so low, you know, but right now the statistics are higher for you to get killed in a mass shooting than you are by an Islamic terrorist. Does that make sense? And there's I think the problem where I'm just amazed that people are so obstinate. Some people, of course, are so obstinate about this. You know, they would actually vote down these laws or threaten, you know, elected officials of never being reelected again just because of this.
Yeah. No, I do agree with you partially. The fact that the fact that something just so happens to kill people at a lesser rate doesn't mean that it's not a threat, right? I mean, but technically by this definition, well, toddlers sticking forks in toasters is a threat. Not to diminish, you know, gun violence or something along these lines. You know, I don't know, heart disease, something that kills predominantly a lot more people a year. But again, this all kind of comes down to the slippery slope methodology of thinking along certain lines. Well, this heart disease kills more people per year than gun violence. Well, again, that doesn't necessarily mean that gun violence isn't a problem, right? Typically, when shootings happen, when mass shootings happen, it typically actually happens with handguns, because there are certain, well, it varies per state, but there are certain criteria for designating mass shootings. Some states you have to kill like 4 more people, right? But so the statistics vary. Honestly, it's all relative per state. But typically, a lot of shootings happen with handguns. A lot of shootings happen with weapons that are either stolen or unregistered. So a lot of shootings happen by people that predominantly are criminals and not necessarily law-abiding gun owners. Even if you want to go by the relative, if you want to go by the legal standards of Florida, technically Nicholas Cruz wasn't a legal gun owner because he got his gun beforehand. He got his gun before the waiting period was over. Pardon me. Also, the police had been called to his house multiple times. He technically should have had a criminal record for domestic violence and all these sort of things that would not qualify you for gun ownership. But he was still somehow able to get a hold of these guns because, let's be honest, the police dropped the ball. The FBI dropped the ball. Even the sheriffs at the school at Parkland, they dropped the fucking ball because they didn't stop this individual. There was no sort of like stopgap. There were no measures in place to actually prevent an individual who should not own a gun from actually getting his hands on it, right? I mean, there are measures in place, but those measures were not followed through with. To be honest, the people who didn't follow through with those measures, they need to be fired and they need to be made an example of, right? Down to the sheriffs that responded to the incident, down to the was it the chief of police that was elected in Florida, or the head sheriff? I can't remember what his name was.
Scott's. There was Scott Israel, and then there was one.
Yeah.
Last name was Scott. Our governor's name is Rick Scott. So yeah, but I think you're giving law enforcement yet one more ball to drop. There's already plenty. Granted, I am in no way, shape, or form defending, especially the one guy who didn't go into the school that was his job. By the way, I turned off the camera because I got to keep blowing my fucking nose, and it's a pain in the ass to do that through a wrestling mask. But anyway,
you're good.
The point is, I just think we're making law enforcement already has enough shit on their hands, you know. And by the way, this whole thing, granted, you're mentioning all these gun deaths and stuff, but wow, it's with high school shootings at this rate, it's pretty unique and it's pretty recent. You know, that's why it never really dawned on me that much about gun control before, but now with this frequency, it's like, damn. At least for me, man, I'm that's why I'm making this video. That's why I'm curious to exercise the ability to have a convincing argument with someone about what could be done. Look, to make this simple, do you think anything could be done? What would you do if all of a sudden you had fucking the ability to try to solve this problem? What would you do?
Well, a lot of this is personally, if you want to talk like just relative to your state, to Florida, they need to do background checks comparative to the federal level. They need to do those kinds of background checks because that's one of the reasons. That's, you know, and I agree. Yes, it's, you know, just giving the police more, you know, balls to drop, so to speak. But I mean, whether we like it or not, this is the responsibility that they have, and they have to follow through with this, right? Gun owners have to do background checks. It's not like you just kind of hand them out like fucking candy. Even at private private gun shows and everything like that, you still do background checks. You know, you have the ability to do background checks at private gun shows. If you're not doing them, then that's legal and your ass needs to go to jail. But stepping back for a second, if we want to look at a solution that is plausible, and this is kind of widening the scope, I don't know how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole, but to a degree, I do think the culture is largely to blame for a lot of these problems. I mean, you have a culture, and granted, it's not so prominent in the United States, but this is a problem in Europe, for instance, where you're getting basic values of masculinity shouted down, right? There's articles every single day that are written about straight white males and the patriarchy and everything like that. And, you know, there are all kinds of kids that, predominantly white males, that get misdiagnosed with ADHD, and they get put on all kinds of drugs. And those drugs have side effects, and they have to be put on antidepressants. So there's a massive cultural aspect that, you know, there's a bunch of kids running around on fucking drugs, high as shit on antidepressants and fucking Ritalin and what is essentially legalized meth and cocaine and all this other bullshittery. So you're dealing with, I don't want to call it a drug epidemic because legally speaking it's not. These are prescribed drugs. Some of these people have legitimate cases of ADHD and whatnot. You know, it's not just a case of boys being rowdy. But largely this is a massive cultural problem, massive cultural shift that we're having to undergo, right? And this problem is relative to even myself. You know, I didn't really grow up with a dad around. I kind of had to find my own way. Okay, my heroes when I was a kid were all people that died 1,000 years ago, right? Like Alexander the Great and all that other kind of shit. So I didn't really have a father figure, and unfortunately, that's a lot of people today. That's a lot of kids my age that didn't grow up with a father figure. There's no one around to teach them manly values, how to handle a firearm, how to go camping, start a fire, right? I learned all that in Boy Scouts, something that I was forced to go to at a Mormon church by my fucking stepmother. Okay, granted, this is all rather personal, but I think it's a good example of the kind of social issues that we're undergoing. We're undergoing social issues that largely, in comparison with the 90s, they're pretty huge. Even during the 80s and 90s, when you're dealing with, you know, quote unquote, massive gang violence and all that stuff, you know, during the 60s and 70s, when you have the Black Panthers going out and killing FBI agents and all of this other kind of crazy crap, relative to those times, we have massive problems on our hands. The problem is that no one wants to deal with them because it involves a deep psychological analysis as to how our culture functions, as to how our social contract with the government functions, as to why we have the rights that we have. Like, for instance, what was it called? Soy Boy Stories? I already forgot the name of it. I already don't care about it.
The video that you did on David Hogg, by the way, the little tears and shit.
Yeah. So it was about, funny enough, one of the small points I just want to bring up, and then I'll let you have the floor. One of the problems I had was that David Hogg said, "Oh, well, us carrying these clear backpacks, this is an invasion of privacy. This violates the First Amendment." Sorry, Hogg. The First Amendment has nothing to do with privacy. You must be talking about the Fourth Amendment, right? The fact that they know what the Second Amendment is fucking mystifying. They have this all crisscrossed. They hardly even know what they're talking about, right? Again, faults with our culture, education system, all that. But to be honest, the problem is not easily solved. And because the problem is not easily solved with legislation, right? This is a cultural problem, I think. People don't want to deal with it. And unfortunately, that's where people like you and me step in, right? And for greater minds than us, some like Jordan Peterson or something. This is a problem that needs to be solved with a kind of grassroots movement, right? The public needs to buckle down. The public needs to say, right, instead of just, you know, doing you know, payments towards my baby mama. Maybe I should actually raise my kids or something like this. Right? It's a huge problem that we probably don't have enough time to discuss. Your thoughts?
No, I agree, man. And it's this stream's been a humbling experience, that's for sure. Because when you start getting into the weeds, especially if you don't get emotional about it and you really start thinking about it, yeah, you realize, damn, there's so many. I hate the word nuance, but there are a lot of nuances to this. And I totally agree. There's a cultural issue. I think there's also the mental health issue of the people who are committing these crimes and stuff like that. And yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I was about to say, I feel like my hands are a little tied because, yeah, you try to go at this and you try to see, like, even though I was saying it as a joke, like, oh, let's see if we could solve this issue once and for all with one live stream and done. No, yeah, it's not that easy. Of course, which is not to say you should stop trying, but the bottom line, though, is I feel like that whole thing with Parkland, off the top of my head, the first thing that could have avoided it, well, yeah, I guess it would have been if law enforcement did their fucking job, if the FBI did their job, if the sheriff did his job, which, by the way, somebody here mentioned that the sheriff's name was Michael Scott, and he was supposedly a Hillary supporter. Okay, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if that's fake news as well. But
sorry, do you mind if I interject really quickly? I want to correct something. MC in the chat said Fourth Amendment mentions privacy. How? Well, the Fourth Amendment, if I remember correctly, has to do with the quartering of soldiers and seizure of property and papers and everything like that. That is a kind of I don't know how to say, but in modern terms, I suppose that would equate to invasion of privacy. I mean, again, this is all cultural relativity and everything like that, but I just want to say that is what I meant, right? Seizure of personal property and everything. But sorry, continue.
Sorry, I had it on mute because I'm like coughing up and shit. Yeah, and it's tricky for me also to be following the comments and to be following you and stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. For right now, I still stand by most of those sensible policies that I mentioned. I'd like to feel that I am doing something useful other than talking shit online. I will be contacting my congressman and my senator to say, look, this is one thing I would like to see, because I think that those are, I mean, revisiting them here, I mean, you look at them again. Yeah, man, I still, we can continue talking about it, and I feel like we'd probably be splitting hairs, but yeah, I mean, with the exception of maybe a couple, I still definitely stand by, what do you call it, having a 30-day waiting period for the gun purchases, no high-capacity clips. I think they make a very big difference. Man, you know what? I would take the chance and just say, let's raise the age limit to 21 on the gun purchases. Let's make it, And then somebody else had mentioned, I think it was Mad Dodge. She was like, hey, man, with the fucking, with the mental health evaluation, all that, you're going to make it like $1,000 for me to be able to buy a gun, especially an AR-15. Maybe that's the price we need. I mean, I don't think it would take that much. I honestly don't think it would require that. And of course, there'd be opportunistic politicians that would try to make that case. I don't think it would have to be that expensive. But man, I think there are a lot of these sensible things that are being pushed back by gun manufacturers and by a lot of gun owners that I think they're being a little too paranoid about losing the Second Amendment. And we would have less mass shootings. We would have a less frequency of this, It seems to me. And it's something worth trying. And by the way, another thing with a lot of this legislation, we wouldn't be losing that. I mean, I forgot the years now, but they did put a ban on semi-automatic rifles for quite some time, if I'm not mistaken. It was like from 1994 to 2004. And of course, a lot of people saying that's when Columbine happened or some shit like that. But there was a ban, and then the ban was lifted. I mean, we are pretty flexible with our laws. We can experiment to see what works and what doesn't work. that's another thing that I wish more people would realize, you know.
Yeah, no, that's the greatest thing about our country. I mean, this is each state serves as a isolated kind of control environment where you can test and see what works and what doesn't. Right? I mean, listen, right. You live in the state of Florida. Okay, if you want that legislation plast let me just put this beer to the side for now. If you want that,
start smoking weed, dude. I had some weed. I was like, should I? And I was like, no.
Yeah, but no, like seriously though, if you want that legislation passed, I don't live in the state of Florida. I don't think I should have a say because those laws don't affect me, right? That's your state. You do with it what you will. So, I mean, but that's a great thing about the United States, I think. You can do whatever you want in your state, right? As long as you're, of course, not breaking federal or state laws. You know, put that little asterisk there. I'm not gonna tell you to go murder my neighbor's cat. But
I become a cat person, but whatever.
No, me too. I own like 4 cats. I'm the crazy cat person on the block, I guess, but just not my neighbor's cat. I don't like my cat. I don't like my neighbor's cats. I like my cats though. My cats are good.
But yeah, okay. Without getting too much into cats, good. We relate. I got 3 of them inside the house. I got like fucking 5 of them that we've adopted in the backyard. So yeah, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that is the good part. As I was saying previously, that's a good part. I mean, if your legislation works, right? Personally, I disagree. I don't think it will. But if your legislation does work, even if just a fraction of it works, that is something to build off of, right? Maybe it is high capacity magazines. Maybe 30 rounds in a magazine. Maybe that is too much. You know, I personally don't know. As I said previously, I can't own a gun because California fees are fucking outrageous. But as far as state legislation goes, I do want to point out to what degree is passing legislation infringing on the right to bear arms. And that is something that is supremely objective, especially when you're talking at the state level. You know, how long should the waiting period be? Is that infringing on the right to bear arms? How much should fees be? Because in my state, in the state of California, you have to pay to take gun classes. If you're going to own handguns, you have to pay to take gun classes. You have to get registration. You have to take psychological evaluations if you're going to get like a concealed carry, if you're going to buy a handgun. And it adds up to really an insane amount. And it adds up to the point where I literally can't afford it. So hypothetically, is that infringing on my rights to, or my right rather, to bear arms? So all of this is rather subjective. And, you know, that's a great part about the United States. We can test in each state, you know, oh, well, what is best? What infringes upon your rights? What's constitutional? What's unconstitutional? You know, what goes to the Supreme Court? What doesn't? But yeah, that is really the great part about our country. If your legislation works for your state, then it works.
No, yeah. And yeah, it's funny. I want to read somebody here. Eric Lee wrote in the comments that he could solve this in 4 easy steps. And that's one of the things that I'm looking for, man. I'm looking for like solutions. And this is not just a matter of fucking bloviating and stuff like that. And I do see this as a problem. But anyway, look, the ones that he's suggesting, number 1, anyone of school age that buys a weapon must get a signed paper from counselor and principal of school they attend. And that's, I maybe agree with that. All school age kids are directly under their parents' responsibility. Whatever they do, their parents are responsible. I think they've tried that too. Maybe not in particularly this, but I have heard that.
Yeah. Do you mind if I tack something on at the end there?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Especially like the Parkland kids, they're touting around their clear backpacks and saying, "Oh, you're violating our First Amendment," even though technically I believe it should be the 4th. But you know, that aside, you know, Tide Pod eaters. But you know, they're talking about the infringement of rights and everything like that. But I mean, the reality of the matter is that when you're out school, you are under the supervision of the state. You are a, you know, quote unquote ward of the state at that point. Your rights are whatever the state decides you have as rights. Like, I'm sorry, but if they want to go through your backpack, they go through your backpack. That is not applicable. Your parents are not in charge of you at that point. It's the state that's in charge of you. That's a reality that a lot of people don't want to necessarily acknowledge.
Well, that's a good point too, which almost sort of contradicts what you're talking about with your right to own a gun and it being infringed by the fees and stuff like that, which of course comes back to the whole point of why these issues are so tricky to fix, and I can see why they haven't, but I think they can. They can. And just to finish off with the points that Eric Lee was making, which I'm gonna probably add those to my sensible gun policy things that I'm gonna fucking contact my congressman about. Hold on a second, I'm trying to do fucking three things at the same time. Let me see here. The third one was federal, state, and local background checks are required on all gun buys. I'm glad to hear that this guy Eric Lee, he's very anti-left, anti-social justice. I'm surprised to hear that, and I'm glad to see that. And then the last one is armed guard at schools. Yeah, I guess yeah, the NRA or gun manufacturers would be definitely down for that. I'd like to see it solved without more fucking guns, you know?
Well, I mean, the last school shooting that happened was stopped by an armed guard.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Or it was not the Parkland. There's one after that made headlines. I actually totally forgot. Hold on.
I thought it was in Maryland, and it was the kid went and he tried to shoot his ex-girlfriend or something. And then when the guy came in to shoot at him, the kid had already shot himself.
Oh, well, he's shooting his ex-girlfriend? Oh, well, those bitches can be ruthless. I can't say I blame them too much there. A safety officer heard a threat. Police say might have involved a threat of shooting. When was this published? February 22nd. Was that? I don't know. I believe this is it. Happened. God, fucking ads. Sorry, happened in Southern California school. Thwarted a potential attack Friday, 2 days after the deadly Valentine's Day shooting in Florida that left 17 people dead, authorities say. Los Angeles Sheriff County's Department said they. I think that's the one. Officer Marino Chavez overheard a 17-year-old student saying he was going to launch an attack within 3 weeks. Chavez was questioned. Yeah, I think that was it.
Yeah, no, this guy, MC, which is another one of my regulars, which, man, again, I'm sorry that I'm not inviting other people, and I've been bad with the comments, but he's basically saying, yeah, it's the Maryland school shooting. He killed his ex-girlfriend and shot another student, and the guard hit the weapon of the perpetrator.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. So, wow, man. I'm almost at a loss for words. Like I said, even though I thought it was a joke to say that we could solve this, I feel like I'm even a little more confused than before. But I think it was still worth it. It was fun to meet you. I'm going to be cutting it short because, man, I'm losing my voice and I'm just coughing every minute pretty much.
Yeah, it's getting hot as hell in this room. I need to turn the fan on soon. I'm going to fall over and die. I'm over here wiping my brow every 2 seconds.
But yeah, man, and also wanted to prove that two people who, you know, disagree could actually talk about this and come to some conclusions that they sort of agree with. And yeah, man, I think these really could be minimized, you know. And I'm gonna see if I just end it there, you know. And thanks everybody for watching, man. Sorry, this is pretty anticlimactic to finish it this way. I really don't. It's funny. I feel a little more confused. I thought that by the end of this, I was going to pretty much be shooting holes through everything you would say. And I'm like, wow, no, I can't. You know, there is a lot to it. And yeah, thanks for making me think about that.
No worries. Thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
No problem, man. Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you want to stick on around for like another, once I shut off, just to say goodbye and shit. And I'm hoping to do these again, with the frequency that I was doing it before, every Wednesday night if I can. But if not, thank you all for tuning in, man. I like to think it was productive. It was productive for me. I have a list. Thanks to some of the comments, I have now something else to add to that list that I will be contacting my congressmen and senators with. And I hope these mass shootings just decrease to the point of ending altogether. But anywho, with that said, thank you for watching. Good night.